Two of our dearest friends, and Nate was someone who has inspired people with his heroism really his whole life, and you guys cannot have the Nelsons back. They are Floridians now. I know they've got their roots in Arkansas, but we cherish them, and we're grateful they're such a central part of our community. And I come from the district in the United States that has the highest concentration of active duty service members and veterans in the country. We love them, we respect them. And I spent a good amount of my time on the Armed Services Committee trying to make sure that the folks at the Pentagon have the patriotism and the worth that is reflective of the people that are actually on the front lines of the fight. And we've got these folks right now running the DOD. They lose equipment, they've lost millions of dollars, they lost the Secretary of Defense for like 5 days. And you just wonder how things aren't exactly going great for the country. And that's what I'm here to talk to you about. Our nation right now is in peril. This is not a time for modest changes around the edges. If we were one blue ribbon commission away, or one renamed post office away, or one earmark for a congressman away from saving this country, you probably wouldn't need to send folks like me up there. But the real challenge is that there is a rot in our nation's capital that is so deeply corrupt. And I see it every day, and it breaks my heart because I walk underneath the murals of Washington and Jefferson and Adams, and I think about these great men who built this great nation, and I watch far too many of my colleagues willing to sell out the people who send them there because of the lobbyists and the special interests and the stock trading and all of the emoluments that they get to receive, and it comes at a cost. We are $34 trillion in debt right now. We are running annual $2.5 trillion deficits. We bring in $5 trillion a year, and we could definitely meet the nation's needs for that. Now, we can't meet all the world's needs. We can't have 10 million people come into the country illegally, but we can meet our nation's needs, right? And instead, we spend $7.5 trillion a year. And that number is just going to continue to go up. And so we will, in the next 10 years, be at a $50 trillion national debt. And right now, I think a lot of people observe that as some abstraction. That's something far away. It doesn't really impact you. But more and more, the impact of those irresponsible decisions in Washington are observed at the gas pump and at the checkout line at the grocery store. And we got a lot of people right now who their starter home has to be their forever home because they can't get into these new interest rates that are driven by so much federal borrowing. When we have to go borrow all this money to pay for welfare for illegal aliens, to pay for wars in faraway lands, then your car loan, your home loan, your credit card rates, those go up. And that is so deeply unfair. And so you wonder, why is that? Why can't we do in Washington with the budget what the states do? Which is you sit down, you negotiate, sometimes somebody gets one way, somebody gets the other way, but at the end of the day, you try to get to balanced budgets. The reason we don't do that is it's not a bug of the system, it's a feature. Because the folks who are buying off your politicians don't want anything subjected to itemized review. They have constructed this absurdity that offends me deeply, where once a year we go take one vote on funding the whole government all at once or not. Now imagine if you did that, where you said, quick, we have to spend $10,000 in the next week or we'll have no food for the year. That's crazy. Right? But they do it because they don't want that review. And what it leads to is the perpetuation of wasteful spending that is not helping anyone, but does a tremendous amount of harm. So I had this idea that instead of governing by continuing resolution and omnibus bill and all these disparate things that are stuck together all at once, that we have single subject spending bills with open amendment to force members of Congress to vote on how they're going to spend your money. And when I did that, it was like I committed a human rights violation in Washington, D.C. D.C. But we took over 700 votes in 2023. Usually they only take about 500, and those additional votes that we took weren't on a bunch of nonsense stuff. They were on a lot of the Appropriations Acts and what we should take out of the budget. And I wish that the good Arkansans that I know to be patriots would send more congressmen that would vote with me to actually reduce spending. Because you got folks in your delegation who go there and vote to advance Joe Biden's spending, Nancy Pelosi's policies, and to approve these debt limits. When we underwrite the debt, you're going to get the spending. Sometimes when a nation is $34 trillion in debt, you got to cut off the credit card and say it's time to start balancing budgets around here. So that they said, oh my gosh, Gaetz is doing all this crazy stuff. But let me tell you how some of those votes went. You know, I don't think that like the United States, that you should pay for an entity called USAID. Okay, that is an entity that is a global venture capital fund where your tax dollars are going to pay for female transgender makeup artists in Indonesia. Actually a thing. Or pride parades in Prague. Hey look, if Prague wants to have a pride parade, they should do it on their own time and their own dime. And we shouldn't be going into debt to China to pay for it. That's so obvious you think you wouldn't have to say it. But members of the Arkansas delegation voted against amendments that we offered to slash the funding to USAID. And then you know, you got conflict going on all over the world because our nation is being run by a like dementia ward escapee and the annoying lady from the HR department. Okay, that is who the rest of the world sees when they look at America. And so of course things are getting less stable and secure. Look, people can say what they want about Trump's tweets. When Trump was president, even the dictators were on their best behavior. They wanted to take $95 billion with no offsets, with no pay-fors, go into debt to China $95 billion to go give money to a bunch of other countries, $60 billion of it to Ukraine. And I'm just thinking, first of all, if you want to send money to Ukraine, go show me what you want to take it out of. Don't go borrow it against the future generations of Americans who want some hope in this country. And, you know, if you want to fund the Israel thing, then how about this? I got a plan to fund Israel. Stop funding the UN. Take every dollar out of the UN. There were people that the UN was paying for with your tax dollars who are actually part of the ones attacking Israel, a place that has a 4,000-year connection to many of our faith. It's appropriate to think well of Israel, but my goodness, the notion that we're paying the UN, they then go and attack Israel. And you know what the UN workers' day job was when they weren't killing Israelis? They were the teachers. They were the people molding the young minds in this part of the world with this hatred where they glorify martyrdom and murder and violence. So we've got to start realizing that America is not the world's police force and we are not the world's piggy bank. We can put the needs of our countrymen first. That doesn't make us isolationists. It makes us patriotic. And the best way to have other countries adopt our values is not to like send the pride flag over. It's to be the best version of ourselves. To show that capitalism and free enterprise and production are things that other nations could copy if they observe what is special here. And that is always where we have been at our best. Those budget issues can be resolved, right? But it does take political courage. The other thing that's going to take some courage to resolve is what's going on the border right now. Because I don't think that this is too hard to solve. We are the nation of the Ring doorbell camera. We like to know who's coming and going. It's not an unsolvable problem. Have you ever been inside of a casino? They know who leaves and who arrives. This is an issue of willpower, and it's because a lot of the donors and a lot of the special interests want the cheap labor. They want open borders. And they're willing to support politicians that will back those open border policies in both political parties. And so those open borders Now, 10 million people into the country, 8 million of those we actually encountered and then let go into the nation. That terrible Langford bill that was in the Senate on immigration, that had you paying billions of dollars more to the NGOs that are trafficking illegals all throughout the country. We can't do these things anymore. It's very simple. You return to the Trump policies of safe third country, remain in Mexico, detain or remove. And if Joe Biden will not shut down this border, then we should have the courage to shut down the government. Because in the meetings we have there, there's all the hand-wringing and bedwetting about, we just can't possibly endure this. But I think the American people are waking up. These last 4 years have been tough on a lot of us. They've been tough on our retirement, our bank accounts, our monthly budgets. But if anything, it's my prayer that this is waking people up to the changes that we have to be able to embrace and what we have to be willing to fight against. Now, if we do endure a government shutdown, we got to take a hatchet to some of these woke and weaponized agencies that have been turned against we the people. And I don't think it's enough just to do horizontal cuts, 1%, 5%. I think we need deep vertical cuts, and we need to sunset and abolish unconstitutional federal agencies like the Department of Education, the EPA, and certainly the ATF. Alcohol, tobacco, and firearms is just like the name of a Florida convenience store chain. So we don't think it ought to be a federal agency. And what they're doing to gun owners right now through rulemaking power and without law, but with the force of law, they're trying to really abolish all of the FFLs that exist, to block our access to our Second Amendment rights, and we must be dogged on that as well. And I don't know that there's any bureaucracy more out of control than the Department of Injustice. Yeah. And when I ran for Congress 7 years ago, I actually thought that the FBI and the CDC were the good guys. I really did. And then you wake up one day and the CDC wants the powers of the CIA and ends up with the credibility of CNN. So at the Department of Injustice, they are fusing the criminal justice system and politics in ways that we typically see present in third world countries, in the most despotic regimes on the planet Earth. But now they are trying to beat Donald Trump in the witness box because they could not beat him legitimately in the ballot box. So if we want our budget to have integrity, if we want our politicians to have integrity, if we want our border to have integrity, then our elections must have integrity again. And this is the part that's a little politically incorrect, but if it's not racist to ask for an ID for a fishing license or a hunting license or welfare benefits, then it is not racist to ask for an ID if someone wants to vote in a U.S. election. I was chatting with some friends about this earlier. When Obama and Holder got out of office, that was his attorney general buddy. They didn't go target just the governorships and the U.S. Senate positions and the ones we see all the commercials on and have all the national attention drawn to. They went and focused on the secretaries of state, the supervisors of election. They wove in all that Soros money, and they got the people who were the district attorneys involved. They got judges elected in a lot of places, and they viewed the elections infrastructure itself as something that was up for grabs. And there are times we think, gosh, I'd love to pass a federal law that just took some of the changes we did in Florida on paper ballots and chain of custody, and actually showing how many people were voting as they were voting, so you can't just will 40,000 new ballots into existence after the rural parts of a state like Michigan or Pennsylvania or Arizona or Georgia have submitted their returns, right? I would love to do that, but then I worry about what happens if we nationalize our election process. Would they water down some of the good reforms? Like in Georgia, we proved that humiliation works. Tucker Carlson told me this, that public humiliation can be one of the greatest drivers of human behavior. And when the people in Georgia couldn't justify what was going on in Fulton County, their legislature got together and they passed signature verification. They tightened up their ballot security process. Not perfect, but they're at least directionally correct. And that, I think, is the model for all of us, to find the places and the people who, maybe it's not right for them to run for Congress, but they could run for a Secretary of State or some elections position. How do we get some of our most talented activists and some of our most patriotic people in position to allow our elections to have the trust of we the people once again? Because if you lose that legitimacy, then we lose America. So that has to be central to our mission going forward. I think there'll be less cheating in Georgia on the elections going forward, but there certainly is a good amount of cheating going on in Georgia if you've been watching the news. I mean, I have been glued to this like it was the OJ trial. The Fonnie Willis, Nathan Wade deal. Like, what came first? Love or charging decisions? And I mean, they had 2 grand juries set up. And I was always watching this wondering, why did they do 1 grand jury? Remember there was that weird lady that was the foreman who came out and was probably flying around on a broomstick somewhere now. So they did that grand jury and then shut it down and then did another one. It's very unusual in criminal practice. And honestly, it might have just been so they could jack up the double billing, right? I mean, maybe Fonnie needed another Belize trip, so they just decided to do it all over again and grift people. Fonnie Willis has a very broad view of the RICO statute. She's charged, Rudy, who took down the mob in New York City. And one of the greatest crime fighters of our entire generation of Americans, they're charging him with RICO. Maybe the predicate criminal act that's actually going on in the state of Georgia is you've got an affair masquerading as an investigation. And their own money laundering is far worse than anything President Trump or Mark Meadows or those folks in Georgia were doing. So how do we clean this up? One of the problems I see is that when members of Congress start to observe a very easy system, where if they give their vote card to the leadership and they give their calendar to the lobbyists, life's pretty good. You got a re-election rate at over 90%. You got a big staff to tell you that your jokes are funny and you're losing weight. And you go to the embassy parties. And meanwhile, we have managed American decline. So there are certain reforms that I'm fighting for in Congress that I think are essential just to get the wrong people out and the right people in. Members of Congress should not be able to trade individual stocks for the same reason that referees aren't allowed to bet on the football game. And we need term limits for members of Congress. And I say that as a guy who's been there for a while. I would be happy to shorten my sentence and adhere to it. But what happens now is a lot of the people who are dynamic go on to something else, and then you get the ones that stay forever that Maxine Waters and Jerry Nadler and Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi has made hundreds of thousands of dollars just in the last few weeks on stock trades that have been enormous for her personally. And the other thing is that I don't believe that members of Congress should ever be able to become lobbyists or registered foreign agents. And that's so obvious, I can't even believe we have to say it, but so many of them do. And if if you get the honor, and I truly, truly consider it an honor to be there fighting for you, if you get the honor to write our nation's laws, you then don't get to enter the transfer portal and then go do it for money for foreign governments or the highest bidder. And like, there's this phenomenon now where members of Congress's spouses become lobbyists. The former chairman of the Intelligence Committee's wife and son were lobbyists. Now, how would you feel if your interests were adverse to the people who were paying the wife of the chair of the Intelligence Committee? You would be totally screwed. And when you see the system tilt that way against we the people, here's what it shows. They are afraid of us, and they should be, because there are more of us than there are of them. And people are waking up. And the other thing is, I don't take money from the law. I'm the only Republican in Congress who takes no donations from federal lobbyists or PACs or any of that nonsense, because there's strings attached to every one of those dollars. And anybody who takes that money and stands up before you and says that there aren't strings attached, they're lying to you. They are lying to you, and it is insulting, and you're smarter than that. And so every time I go out and do one of these briefs, inevitably I get a question or a comment. Have we lost it already? With an open border, 10 million people here, a budget that's out of control, a federal government weaponized against it, is there even the chance to save this thing? Or do you just try to protect what you have? And I remember the sadness and the desperation and the malaise during those Obama years, when we were told that 2% growth was all we could ever have, that just whoever showed up unaccompanied at the border was going to be allowed in nonetheless. And I saw the way President Trump put this country on his back. And he got this economy roaring. And you know what? He even stiffened the spines of some of those weak Republicans that I have to work with in the United States Congress. Courage is contagious. So we get our man back in power. We have exposed the lying media and the deep state. And we better defang and defund every one of those woke, weaponized agencies in order to allow the liberty and freedom of we the people to flourish. Thank you again to the Nelsons. Thank you to all of you. I am so honored to be in this fight with you. This is our country. This is our birthright. This is our destiny. I'm ready to fight for it, and I know you are too. Let's go get them. Thank you, guys.